The sting of betrayal doesn't always come from an enemy. It comes from the person you trusted most, the one you'd never expect to turn on you. That day, as his words echoed in my ears, I felt my stomach twist into knots. He looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You should have seen this coming." The smirk on his face was sharp enough to slice through the air. I froze. My throat tightened and my heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. It wasn't fear. It was disbelief. How could he? After everything we'd been through, after the years of loyalty, after every sacrifice I made for him, this was how he chose to repay me? The silence in the room was deafening. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed to mock me. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to shake him until he remembered who I was and what I had done for him. But he didn't care. His eyes were cold, distant, as if I were nothing more than an obstacle in his way. When the door slammed shut behind him, I felt the floor beneath me crumble. My legs trembled, and for a second, I nearly collapsed. The betrayal hit harder than a physical blow. It left me hollow, like someone had scooped the life out of me. But here's the thing. Betrayal doesn't just destroy you. It reshapes you. Looking back, the signs had been there all along. The little digs he disguised as jokes, the whispered conversations that ended the second I walked into the room, the sudden mistakes that somehow always worked in his favor and against mine. I ignored them all because I wanted to believe in him. I wanted to believe family meant loyalty, that trust still held some weight in this world. Clearly, I was wrong. That day wasn't just about him turning his back on me. It was about him making sure I felt small, unwanted, crushed under the weight of his betrayal. The cruel satisfaction in his smile told me this wasn't an accident. He wanted me broken. But I didn't break. I refused to. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white. My chest burned with a mix of rage and sorrow, but beneath it all, something else stirred. A fire I didn't know I carried. I thought about every sleepless night I spent planning, working, and protecting him. I thought about every moment I held him up when he should have fallen. And I thought about how easily, how willingly, he had cut me down. If he thought this was the end of me, he was dead wrong. All he'd done was awaken a side of me I didn't even know existed. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every look, every sign I had ignored. My heart ached, but my resolve hardened. This wasn't just going to fade into the background of my life. No, he was going to regret this, every single part of it. But before I tell you how I made him regret betraying me, you need to know who I am and why his betrayal cut so deep. My name is Amelia, I'm 29 years old, and I grew up in a quiet suburb just outside of Chicago. On the surface, my childhood looked ordinary. Tree-lined streets, neighborhood barbecues, family gatherings every Sunday. But beneath that picture-perfect image was a family dynamic that shaped me into who I am today. My father was a strict man, the kind whose voice could silence a room without him even raising it. He believed in discipline, responsibility, and hard work. My mother, on the other hand, was softer, the kind of woman who filled the house with warmth no matter how cold life got outside. I was their eldest child, and that came with expectations. Be the role model, set the example, carry the family's pride. Then there was him, my younger cousin Daniel. We were only a year apart, but because his parents lived overseas for most of his childhood, he spent nearly every weekend and many summers at our house. Over time, he wasn't just a cousin to me. He was more like a brother. We grew up side by side, sharing secrets, competing over grades, sneaking cookies from the kitchen when Mom wasn't looking. If anyone had asked me back then, I would have sworn Daniel was the one person who would always stand by me. And in many ways, I made sure of it. When we got older, I was the one who covered for him when he stayed out too late. I helped him study when he was failing classes. I even gave him my savings once so he could pay off a debt he had gotten himself tangled in. I believed in him, even when no one else did. But as the years went on, something shifted. I noticed how Daniel's gratitude turned into expectation. He stopped saying thank you, and instead started acting like my help was something he was entitled to. Whenever he stumbled, I was there to catch him, but he never offered the same in return. At family gatherings, the comparisons only made it worse. Amelia is so responsible, such a hard worker, my relatives would say, while Daniel would roll his eyes and mutter under his breath. Sometimes I'd catch him glaring at me, his jaw tight, as if my success was a shadow he couldn't escape. I brushed it off at the time, telling myself he just needed more time to find his way. But deep down, I felt it, the resentment building inside him like a storm cloud waiting to burst. I wanted so badly to believe we were on the same team, that no matter what, blood was thicker than jealousy or disappointment. I held on to that belief for far too long. I thought we were bound by loyalty, by the years of memories and sacrifices that tied us together. I couldn't have been more wrong. Because one day, Daniel wouldn't just betray my trust. He would go out of his way to humiliate me, to strip me of everything I had worked for. And the cruelest part? He enjoyed it. That moment still plays in my head like a film I can't shut off. His smirk, his words, his utter disregard for everything we once shared. It was the moment that changed everything, and it was only the beginning of the storm he unleashed in my life. Looking back, the cracks in my relationship with Daniel had been widening for years. They weren't gaping wounds at first, just small fissures that I chose to ignore because I didn't want to believe what they meant. But those tiny cracks eventually split wide open, and by the time I realized, it was already too late. It started with little things. When I earned my first promotion at work, my whole family congratulated me, but Daniel muttered, "Must be nice when everything just falls into your lap." His words stung because I knew how hard I had worked. Late nights, skipped vacations, endless stress. But he dismissed it all with one bitter comment. Then came the lies. Daniel began borrowing money he never paid back. At first it was small amounts, 50 here, 100 there. I brushed it off, telling myself he was struggling, that he would return it when he could. But soon, the amounts grew larger. I'd ask about repayment and he'd snap, "You act like I'm some kind of criminal. I said I'd pay you back, didn't I?" His defensiveness was sharp, almost rehearsed, and I'd feel guilty for even questioning him. Family gatherings became a battlefield in subtle ways. Daniel would drop little comments in front of our relatives, twisting the truth to make me look selfish. "Yeah, Amelia helped me with some bills, but she never lets me forget it," he'd say with a forced laugh, while everyone else looked at me like I was keeping score. Or he'd say, "Not everyone can be perfect like Amelia," his voice dripping with sarcasm. People chuckled awkwardly, but I could feel his resentment tightening around me like a noose. The final straw came when he started meddling in my career. I had been working tirelessly on a major project at my company, one that could secure me a promotion and change everything for me financially. Daniel knew how important it was. I had confided in him late at night, telling him about the stress, the endless hours, and my hopes. He nodded, pretending to support me. I thought he was proud, but I was wrong. 1 week before the project's presentation, confidential details were leaked. Information only a handful of people knew. At first, I thought it was a freak accident, maybe a careless slip from someone at the office. But then I found out Daniel had been in contact with one of my colleagues, feeding him details in exchange for money. Money. My cousin, my brother in everything but name, sold me out for cash. When I confronted him, my voice shook with rage. "Daniel, how could you? You knew what this meant to me." He didn't flinch. He just leaned back, arms crossed, and said with a smirk, "Don't be so dramatic, Amelia. It's not like you would have shared your success with me anyway." The words hit harder than a slap. My mind reeled. This wasn't jealousy anymore. This was calculated. He had chosen to stab me in the back, fully aware of the damage it would cause. And the worst part? He wasn't done yet. Because the night of the presentation, when I thought I had hit rock bottom, Daniel made sure to twist the knife even deeper, right in front of everyone. The night of the presentation, I walked into the conference hall with my heart pounding in my chest. Months of sleepless nights, countless revisions, and everything I'd poured into this project, all of it was about to be judged. This was supposed to be my moment, the turning point of my career. My boss, senior executives, even potential investors were sitting in the audience. I had rehearsed every line, memorized every slide, but as I stood at the podium and began to speak, something felt off. Whispers rippled through the room. People exchanged glances, frowns deepening as I clicked through my carefully crafted slides. That's when I saw it. My data, my research, the very heart of my project, had been altered. Charts were mislabeled, statistics scrambled, entire sections deleted. I froze, my mouth going dry. This wasn't a simple error. Someone had tampered with my presentation. And then, from the corner of the room, I saw him. Daniel. Leaning casually against the wall, arms crossed, wearing that same smug grin I'd come to hate. My stomach dropped. Panic surged through me as murmurs turned into whispers, whispers into outright questions. "This doesn't make sense," one executive muttered loudly. "Is this a joke?" another asked. My boss's face hardened, his disappointment slicing into me like a blade. I tried to recover, to explain that this wasn't what I had prepared. My voice shook as I said, "There's been a mistake." But before I could finish, Daniel stepped forward. Loud enough for everyone to hear, he said, "Maybe you should have double-checked your work, Amelia. Some of us can't afford to make sloppy mistakes." The room erupted into uneasy laughter. My cheeks burned with humiliation, my throat tight with rage. Everyone's eyes darted between me and him, and in that instant I realized the trap he had set. He hadn't just leaked my project, he sabotaged it, and then made sure to be there to watch me crumble. "Sit down, Amelia," my boss said coldly, cutting me off mid-sentence. "We'll discuss this later." I wanted to scream, to expose Daniel for what he had done, but my voice was gone. My body felt like lead as I gathered my notes and walked off the stage. The applause I had dreamed of was replaced with whispers of doubt and pity. My career, the one thing I had built from the ground up, was unraveling before my eyes, and Daniel was standing there, enjoying every second. After the meeting ended, I found him waiting for me outside. "Why?" I demanded, my voice hoarse. He tilted his head, pretending to think. "Because, Amelia, I'm tired of being in your shadow. Everyone praises you, worships you, while I'm the screw-up. Not anymore." His grin widened. "Now they'll see you're not perfect either." My hands shook, not from fear but from the sheer fury boiling inside me. I wanted to slap that smirk off his face, to scream until the whole world knew what he had done, but instead I bit my tongue. I let him walk away. Because deep down I knew one thing. His moment of triumph wouldn't last forever. He had taken everything from me, but soon I was going to take everything from him. For days after the disaster, I barely left my apartment. The humiliation replayed in my head like a cruel film loop I couldn't shut off. The whispers, the smirks, Daniel's voice slicing through the silence of the conference hall. Every second burned into my memory. My inbox was flooded with pitying emails from coworkers, and my boss gave me the cold shoulder. My career, the one thing I had poured my soul into, was dangling by a thread. At first, I broke. I cried until my eyes swelled. I barely ate. My confidence shattered into pieces so sharp I couldn't pick them up without bleeding. But beneath the grief, something else was growing. Something stronger, hotter, sharper. Rage. Pure, unfiltered rage. One night, as I stared at my reflection in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. She wasn't weak anymore. She wasn't a victim. She was furious, and fury has a way of clearing the fog. That's when I made a vow. If Daniel wanted a war, then he'd get one. But I wasn't going to fight him with tears or outbursts. I was going to fight him with precision. He had underestimated me, thinking I would crumble and disappear. Instead, I would rise from the ashes, and when I did, I'd make sure he regretted every choice he made. So I started gathering pieces. First, I traced the sabotage. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. My laptop logs showed activity during times I wasn't even home. A friend from IT confirmed my files had been tampered with using an external drive, something Daniel had easy access to when he borrowed my computer weeks before. The proof was sitting there waiting for me to use. Then I dug deeper. I started asking subtle questions around the family, playing dumb, pretending to be broken while secretly fishing for information. And it worked. People talk when they think you're defeated. I learned that Daniel had been bragging behind my back, boasting about how he finally put Amelia in her place. The arrogance dripped off every word they repeated to me. But here's the thing about arrogance. It makes people sloppy. As I pieced everything together, I also looked at his life more closely. His debts weren't gone. In fact, they were worse. The money he got for sabotaging me barely scratched the surface. He was still drowning, still gambling, still owing the wrong people. His smug confidence was nothing but a mask, one I planned to rip off in the most public way possible. I spent weeks building my case. Screenshots, bank transfers, testimonies from people who had overheard his drunken confessions. I gathered it all. And while I worked, I smiled in front of him. I pretended to be the broken, humiliated cousin licking her wounds. I let him think he'd won, because the sweeter the victory he felt, the more devastating his downfall would be. Finally, the opportunity came. A family reunion, packed with relatives, friends, and neighbors. The perfect stage. Daniel loved being the center of attention, and he strutted around that night like a king who had conquered his rival. He didn't know that I was about to burn his entire kingdom to the ground. Because in my bag, I carried everything. Every piece of proof, every weapon I needed. And once I opened my mouth, there would be no going back. The night of the family reunion, the air buzzed with laughter, music, and the smell of roasted food. Relatives filled every corner of the house, glasses clinking, voices overlapping. I forced myself to smile, greeting aunts and uncles, hugging cousins, pretending like nothing had happened. But under the surface, my heart raced with anticipation. Tonight wasn't just another gathering. Tonight was justice. Daniel walked in late, as usual, soaking up the attention the second he crossed the threshold. He wore his best suit, grinning wide, acting like he owned the place. "Amelia!" he boomed, clapping me on the shoulder. "Looking better these days. Finally recovering from that mistake at work?" A ripple of chuckles passed through the room. My cheeks heated, but not from shame this time, from the delicious knowledge of what was about to unfold. I waited until everyone was gathered in the living room, plates in hand, chatter filling the air. Then I cleared my throat. My voice was steady, calm, almost too calm. "I have something to share," I said. Dozens of eyes turned to. "Oh, me? Curious." Daniel smirked, clearly enjoying the spotlight shifting to his favorite rival. I began slowly, weaving the story of the project I had worked on. I described the long nights, the effort, and then how it all fell apart. Gasps echoed as I explained the tampered files, the missing data, the humiliating presentation. Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed, smirking as though none of it touched him. Then I dropped the first piece of evidence. A flash drive. "This," I said, holding it up, "contains the proof that my computer was accessed without my knowledge. The times match up perfectly with when Daniel borrowed my laptop." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Daniel laughed, dismissive. "You're really going to blame me for your incompetence?" But I wasn't finished. I projected screenshots onto the TV, thanks to a cousin who helped me set it up earlier. Bank transfers, messages, even a voice note he had drunkenly left for a friend bragging about how he ruined me. Every word echoed through the room. Finally put Amelia in her place. Easy money. The smirk slid off his face. His jaw tightened, his eyes darting around the room as whispers turned into glares. This is fake," he shouted, but his voice cracked. "Is it?" I asked softly, stepping closer. "Because I also spoke to the people you owe money to. They confirmed how desperate you've been, desperate enough to sell out your own family." The room fell silent, the kind of silence that suffocates. Our relatives stared at him, disappointment etched in every face. My mother covered her mouth, shaking her head. My father's voice boomed like thunder. "Daniel, how could you disgrace this family?" Daniel stammered. "She's lying. But no one believed him anymore. His mask was gone, shredded in front of everyone. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift off my chest. My hands stopped trembling. My voice didn't falter. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "You tried to destroy me, Daniel, but all you did was destroy yourself." The room erupted. Some gasped, some muttered in anger, others walked away from him altogether. Daniel's face went pale, his power gone in an instant. But I wasn't done yet, because exposing him was only the first step. There was still one final blow I had been saving, the one that would end his games forever. The room was still buzzing after I exposed Daniel, but I wasn't finished. Not yet. Everyone had seen the evidence of his betrayal, But there was one final card I had kept close to my chest, the one that would leave no doubts about who he truly was. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. My hands no longer trembled. They were steady, sure. I laid the papers on the coffee table for everyone to see. These, I said, are copies of Daniel's debts. Gambling debts, loan sharks, unpaid bills. He didn't just betray me. He's been dragging our family's name through the mud for years. Gasps filled the room as people leaned in, their eyes widening at the amounts. This can't be real, someone muttered. But it was real, too real. Daniel's face turned crimson. You went digging through my life? He shouted, his voice cracking with panic. I met his gaze calmly. No, Daniel, you did this to yourself. You thought you could keep living off lies and manipulation, but the truth always catches up. And tonight, it caught up to you. He lunged toward the table, trying to snatch the papers, but my father stepped in, blocking him with a glare so sharp it could cut steel. Enough, my father said, his voice shaking with fury. You're done embarrassing this family. The humiliation hit Daniel harder than any physical blow. He looked around the room, but there was no sympathy left for him. Our relatives turned away, some whispering angrily, others refusing to meet his eyes. The same people he had once charmed, manipulated, and deceived were now watching him crumble. For a long moment, the only sound was Daniel's shallow breathing. His shoulders sagged as the realization sank in. He had lost. He had lost the trust, the respect, the very family he had leaned on his whole life. I could have stopped there. I could have let him wallow in his downfall. But I wanted him to feel the weight of every ounce of pain he had caused me. So I looked him straight in the eye and said, You thought I would break, Daniel. You thought you'd bury me under your lies. But all you did was remind me that I'm stronger than you ever imagined. And from this moment on, you mean nothing to me. Silence fell. The finality in my voice was louder than any shouting match could have been. Daniel's mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came out. He turned, shoved past a few relatives, and stormed out of the house. The slam of the front door echoed like a final chapter closing. As I stood there, the weight I had carried for years lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Daniel no longer had power over me. His betrayal had scarred me, yes, but it had also reshaped me into someone stronger, someone who refused to be broken again. That night, as I sat with my family, listening to their apologies, their support, I realized something important. Betrayal doesn't define you. What defines you is how you rise from it. And I rose higher than Daniel ever thought possible. So, to everyone watching my story right now, tell me in the comments, have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? How did you rise above it? Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories like this, yo. Your support helps keep these powerful stories alive. Because remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living free, stronger, and untouchable.